if Rodri is out for the season, are Arsenal officially title favourites, but also by some distance? Let's have that chat before we talk about this Rodri injury and who comes in. You're a City fan, Kim. Does it feel like the end? You sounded nervous before the show started.
Yeah, I'm not nervous. I mean, I think he's the most important player to City. I think he's probably the most important individual player to any one club in the Premier League, particularly in that top half of the Premier League. So it's a huge, huge miss. I think it does definitely put Arsenal certainly, as equals, if not favourites, over Manchester City. But then you look at what's happened the last couple of seasons. Kevin De Bruyne was out for 6 months last year. He was probably City's second best player. Arsenal still couldn't clinch the league title. So a lot is going to rest on what Arsenal can do and the mentality that they have going forward into the season. And it will also just depend on how City can replace Rodri. It's quite lucky that it's happened before January than after January. So Pep Guardiola can assess his options. We can see if Gundogan might want to go in there. We can see if Kovacic, maybe John Stones as well in that position. He was, of course, man of the match in the Champions League final, playing basically as a CDM in Rodri's role. And if those don't work, then City have got the January transfer window to try and select a replacement for that period of the season where they are particularly good and usually don't win. So it's going to be really, really difficult for City. I think Arsenal fans will be, putting their hands together and will be very, very happy.
I mean, they're all over social media. Yeah. It is a disgrace, by the way. But with that in mind, like considering at the start of the season, we all sort of said that Arsenal and City will be the two that go for it. Arsenal lost Ødegaard. We were sat on here saying, they're going to have big problems for the next month or so. But they have options in there. As you just said there, that City missed De Bruyne, but they always have options for De Bruyne. But is he the one man that, like, you go, that's the guy they just couldn't lose?
Yeah, I feel like before Rodri's injury, City looked infallible. If you look at the start of the season, people talk about Rodri missing games for City and them struggling, but I think game against Arsenal was his first start in the Premier League. They'd won their 4 previous games before that. So City are obviously a well-oiled machine. We know how much of a difference he makes to the City side, but I think what it does is it makes the Premier League a little bit more human than it's been over the last 3 or 4 seasons. I feel like, obviously, Arsenal now, they don't become favourites. I think City are still favourites, but Arsenal are very close to it. And I think it brings in a team like Liverpool as well. I feel like the points total won't be as high as we've seen over the last few years. And it just means that it will have more of a title race. I still think City are favourites. They seem to find a way, no matter what happens, like Kim touched on. De Bruyne
but wouldn't you say, though, in this regard, because it's Rodri, because the alternatives, with no respect to any of the alternatives, but Stones won't stay fit, like, unless he magically does this season. Kovacic, as you all know, as a Chelsea fan, I don't think he's suited to play as 6. I think he's technically great, but he's also injury prone. And then there's Gundogan, who's now 33. And he did do this role in, was it 18, 19? Yeah. And he was unbelievable. But now he's 33, many years on. It's a big ask for anyone to fill those shoes.
Yeah, it would have to be by committee because you can't replace Rodri. He's the best player in this position in the world. And I feel like when you talk about loads of teams, like Arsenal, for example, even though Arsenal are a very good team, if they had a Rodri, I think they'd be title favourites. If Liverpool had a Rodri, I think they'd be title favourites. So he is that X factor, he's that difference maker. But I back Pep Guardiola, who, by all accounts, is the greatest manager of all time. This City team, who's the greatest team we've ever seen in the Premier League, to find a resolution. They coped without Erling Haaland for parts of last season, without Kevin De Bruyne for parts of last season, and I feel like they'll be able to cope without Rodri. It won't be seamless, it won't be perfect, but this is a City team that's got so much strength and depth and so much know-how as well that they'll find a solution. And I feel like when they do face stern tests against the likes of Arsenal or Liverpool, even a Chelsea bringing them into it, I think they'll find a way around it, and it won't be the City side that we've seen to play this fluid football, can retain possession in midfield, but it'll be a City side that'll find a resolution.
I think that's quite a good point, and I think we spoke about it a couple of weeks back about, we were so glowing about Pep Guardiola. I think he's the best manager of all time, and one reason for that is how he adapts to different situations. Of course, there was a period of time where Sergio Aguero was injured. He played Phil Foden as a false nine, and City won the league with second record points. So he's very, very...
We cannot replace him. Crying.
We cannot replace him. Crying with tears in his eyes, and then we go and do the 4P. Like, we can replace him because Pep Guardiola's there. But one thing he has really struggled with is replacing Rodri. Of course, the Calvin Phillips signing, 40 million, he looked amazing under Bielsa. That didn't work out. And you look at the stats without Rodri, 13 wins, 1 draw and 7 losses, 61.9% win rate compared to 74%. Of course, last season lost to Wolves away, Villa away and Arsenal away in the last minute with that Martinelli goal without Rodri. And it seems like Guardiola has never really found out exactly how to play without Rodri. He's never really had to for a long period of time, and that obviously might be part of the reason for it. I think that the next few weeks, maybe couple of months, are going to be really, really crucial for City, because this is the finding out period. This is where Pep Guardiola is going to do his experiments. He's going to see if maybe he can put 2 people in there. Maybe Rico Lewis can fit in there. As I mentioned, maybe John Stones. So I think the next couple of months are really, really vital, but it's a huge, huge miss. I can't think of anyone in the Premier League who is as big a miss to their club as Rodri is.
Well, can we talk about that then? Because I understand how important Rodri is, and he's City's most important player, you'd argue. But I look at like a team like Liverpool. I think if they lost Virgil van Dijk, I think that would be a bigger miss. I just think because of the way that City have constructed their squad and there's so much strength in depth, that it won't be like for like, but they've got ways to get around the situation. Whereas a team like Liverpool, if they lost Van Dijk, there is no solution really. There's no replacing him.
But do you not think that number 6 role is probably the most important role, maybe in world football, for every single team, particularly Pep Guardiola's City team?
I think it depends on the team, to be fair. So I think Kweku makes a good point with Van Dijk there. Liverpool can't play as high without Van Dijk there. They don't win as many aerial duels, so they won't want the ball to go out for corners and throw-ins as frequently. So I think if you discard him and bring in... Also, then it comes to depth as well. Liverpool bringing in Gomez and Kwanzaa, with no respect to either of those two guys. Kwanzaa's a kid, and Gomez hasn't quite proven himself as a full-time centre-back. And then it also depends on the team's expectation. Like, your expectation as a City fan is we have to win the league, and so Rodri is critical to that piece. I think someone like Saka at Arsenal, like, probably doesn't compare to Van Dijk and Rodri, but their next option is trying to think of who could play on the right-hand side. Reece Nelson's gone out on loan. They don't really have anyone, like Jesus might play on the right, but the drop off in quality is quite big.
But I guess what you're saying though is that City have a lot of good players, but we don't have a number 6. We tried to buy one in Calvin Phillips, it didn't work, and now we have no replacement. And if you just go through the options, you've got Kovacic, who has started the season very well. Obviously, City won all the games where he was starting in that position, but he's not a natural number 6, and he does leave a lot of space in behind. He's also nowhere near as creative as Rodri. He can't play those balls in. Ilkay Gundogan now seems like a pretty astute buy because of what's happened. But again, as you mentioned, he's 33, probably doesn't have the legs to play all the games in the Premier League and the Champions League. And then you're shoehorning in either a centre-back in John Stones or a kid right-back in Rico Lewis. So there is actually no cover for that position whatsoever. You're going to just have to shoehorn a few different players in different positions, which is obviously going to unsettle the balance of the entire team.